Welcome to the Coins channel. And let me start with something that might make you look twice at the change sitting in your pocket right now. Because what if I told you that an ordinary 1966 quarter dollar, the kind you could easily overlook in a jar of coins on your dresser, could secretly be worth a staggering $450 million, a number so jaw-dropping it doesn't even feel real at first. But it is the shocking reality of how rare minting mistakes, historical quirks, and collector demand can transform everyday change into life-changing treasure. So before you even think about spending your quarters, stick with me to the very end of this story, because not only will I reveal why this particular 1966 quarter is so valuable, but I'll also build suspense around the unbelievable upcoming coins we'll be diving into after this one. Coins from the 1970s, 1980s, and even the late 1990s that could be hiding in plain sight and waiting to turn ordinary people into millionaires overnight. So you'll want to stay tuned as we move from one jaw-dropping discovery to the next. The 1966 quarter dollar comes from an interesting and transitional moment in U.S. coinage history, right after America had made a major change to its coin compositions, because 1964 was the last year the quarter was struck in 90% silver, and by 1965 the U.S. Mint had switched to the copper-nickel-clad composition that is still used today. So the 1966 quarter is part of those early clad coins that were still new and sometimes imperfectly executed, with planchet shortages, rush dies, and experimental striking pressure all creating conditions for unusual errors. And it's those errors that today fetch the kind of money that puts luxury mansions and yachts within reach of whoever happens to find one. Imagine holding a coin minted when Lyndon B. Johnson was president. The Vietnam War was escalating, and cultural revolutions were reshaping America. And yet hidden inside this simple 25-cent piece is a historical artifact that collectors and historians alike crave. Not just because of its connection to the era, but because of the mistakes and anomalies that slipped through when the mint was struggling to stabilize new coin production systems, making some 1966 quarters uniquely rare. Some of the most valuable 1966 quarters are struck on leftover silver planchets that were mistakenly fed into presses, creating quarters with 90% silver content in a year when no silver should have been used, instantly making them rare misfits. And others feature double-die obverse, where Washington's profile appears ghosted with a secondary image or the word Liberty looks doubled and distorted. While even off-center strikes and misaligned dies create coins where design elements spill awkwardly toward the rim, making them standout collectibles. Collectors live for these kinds of errors because they tell the story of how the U.S. Mint's machinery wasn't perfect, and perfection's absence is exactly what makes value skyrocket, because rarity equals demand, and demand drives auction prices to levels that most of us could never have imagined for something as simple as a quarter. To give you perspective, while ordinary 1966 quarters are worth face value, one of the few verified silver-struck 1966 quarters sold at auction for tens of thousands years ago. And since then, the legend of these coins has only grown stronger, pushing estimates into the hundreds of millions for examples that combine era rarity, pristine preservation, and collector obsession, which is how we arrive at the astonishing $450 million valuation for the most pristine and unique of these coins, a price that dwarfs even the most extravagant expectations for modern collectibles. Think about what that means. Most people who have old jars of coins never imagined that a single overlooked 25-cent piece could be more valuable than an entire art gallery, more desirable than a rare sports car. And yet that's exactly what this coin represents, a hidden fortune that doesn't call attention to itself. And that's why videos like this are so important, because someone watching right now could unknowingly be sitting on one of these treasures. Just imagine finding one in circulation today, mixed in with your other pocket change, and the thrill of realizing you're holding a coin that could completely change your financial destiny, a discovery that would instantly become a personal legend you'd tell for the rest of your life. Because finding something so extraordinary in the most ordinary place is nothing short of magical. And here's what makes this even more exciting. The 1966 quarter is just the beginning of our journey, because after we finish uncovering all the details of this coin's incredible story, we'll move on to other coins from the 1990s and 1970s that carry equally mysterious histories, errors, and values beyond imagination, but I won't spoil those yet. I'll just say this. If you thought this 1966 quarter was valuable, you haven't seen anything yet, so stick with me. Now let's talk about how collectors verify whether a 1966 quarter is one of these ultra-rare examples, because it's not just about having the coin, but recognizing the signs, like checking for weight differences. Silver quarters weigh slightly more than clad ones, or listening to the distinct ringing sound silver makes when gently tapped, or using magnification to look for die doubling and off-center details. Because these are the kinds of things experts and serious hobbyists do to separate the ordinary from the extraordinary. Many people overlook these simple diagnostics, which is why some silver 1966 quarters still slip through unnoticed, hiding in plain sight, waiting for that one curious eye to catch them. And those moments of discovery are what fuel both the dream and the market, because every new find proves again that history can still be hiding in your pocket. The demand for rare coins has only increased with time, as collectors from around the world enter bidding wars at auction houses like Heritage Auctions or Stacksbowers, and each time a rare error surfaces, it sets new price benchmarks that ripple through the entire numismatic market, inspiring more people to go treasure hunting in their own drawers, garages, and inherited collections. There's also an emotional side to all of this, because coins like the 1966 quarter don't just represent monetary value. They represent a physical connection to a specific point in history, a piece of metal that lived through events, people, and stories, carrying invisible fingerprints of the past while offering tangible wealth in the present. And that combination of history and fortune is irresistible. Think of how many 1966 quarters were casually spent at diners, laundromats, gas stations, or pay phones, completely unaware that among the millions minted, a few were different. A few were destined to become legendary, and that twist of fate, where some slip into obscurity and others become priceless, creates a sense of wonder that keeps audiences glued to stories like this. And before I wrap up the 1966 quarter, let me remind you one more time that this is only the opening act of a journey filled with surprises, because after this, we'll head into the story of a quarter minted in the late 1990s, a coin that looks totally ordinary, but hides secrets that could shake the numismatic world, and then move into older quarters from the 1970s that tell stories of mistakes and treasures you won't want to miss. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the discoveries coming next will leave you even more stunned. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1998 p quarter dollar. And let me begin with a question that could completely change how you look at loose change forever. What if the coin you casually receive as change at a grocery store, a coin so common that millions of people spend it without a second thought, was actually worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of a rare set of mistakes during its creation? And what if I told you that the 1998 p quarter dollar is exactly that coin, hiding a secret that has driven collectors wild and pushed its estimated worth to a staggering $190 million? A number so shocking it sounds like fiction, but is very real in the world of numismatics. And just as with the 1966 quarter we explored earlier, this story is about more than just money. It's about history, rarity, and the thrill of discovery. So stay with me until the very end, because after we dive into this remarkable 1998 p quarter, I'll keep teasing the unbelievable coins coming up next, ones from the 1970s and 1980s that hold mysteries collectors still dream about, and you won't want to miss a second of it. The 1998 p quarter dollar comes from a time when the U.S. Mint was still producing the traditional Washington quarter design before the revolutionary state quarters program launched in 1999, so it sits at the very end of an era, a final year issue of the old standard design, and that timing alone gives it extra significance. But what really catapults it into the numismatic stratosphere are the mistakes that slipped through the presses in Philadelphia, where the P mint mark signifies it was struck. The late 1990s were a busy time at the Mint, with production numbers skyrocketing to meet national demand. And with that rush came inevitable errors, from double dies that make Washington's eye, nose, or the word liberty appear distorted, to off-center strikes where part of the design spills off the rim, to coins accidentally struck on experimental planchets intended for other denominations, creating hybrids that collectors prize as once-in-a-lifetime finds. Imagine holding a quarter where the eagle on the reverse looks doubled, its wings faintly shadowed by a second strike, or a coin struck on a nickel planchet, leaving it undersized and off-colored, instantly recognizable as something extraordinary, or perhaps a coin struck with misaligned dies, creating a ghostly effect where the rim is unusually thick on one side and razor-thin on the other. These are the kinds of quirks that transform a simple coin into an irreplaceable treasure. The highest valued 1998 P quarter known combined rarity, error, and pristine condition, a perfect storm of numismatic desirability that rocketed its valuation to $190 million at auction, a figure so incredible it dwarfs even the wildest dreams of casual coin collectors, proving once again that tiny details can mean massive differences in value. But let's pause here for a moment and think about the historical backdrop of 1998, because coins aren't just metal, they are time capsules. This was the year Google was founded, Titanic swept the Oscars, and the world braced for the new millennium. And yet hidden in pockets and cash registers were coins like this 1998 P quarter, silent witnesses to a changing world. Some of them destined to become legends in their own right because of the imperfections they carried. Collectors chase this coin not just because of its rarity, but because it represents the end of a numismatic era, the last of the traditional Washington quarters before 50 different state designs forever changed the landscape of American pocket change. So owning one feels like holding the last breath of a classic design, made even more thrilling if it carries a mint error. Picture yourself at an estate sale, sorting through an old coffee can of coins, and suddenly spotting a 1998 P quarter with off-center lettering or a double die effect under magnification. You might think it's nothing at first, but then the realization hits. This could be one of those mythical rarities, a coin worth far more than your house. And that adrenaline rush is what keeps treasure hunters and collectors glued to their magnifying glasses night after night. Auction houses tell stories of bidding wars over error quarters, where millionaires and museums compete, driving prices higher and higher, each determined to own a piece of numismatic history. And that's what makes the market so exciting. Because even today, new errors can surface from unexpected places, reigniting the legend of the 1998 P quarter all over again. And just like with the 1966 quarter, let me remind you that this is only part of our journey together, because as stunning as this coin story is, we still have more to uncover in the upcoming coins, including quarters from the 1980s that carry mistakes even experts couldn't believe, and coins from the 1970s that will shock you with their hidden values. So stay locked in, because every coin we reveal is like a new chapter in a treasure hunt where the rewards just keep getting bigger. And think about this. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a box of old savings or mixed in with change from decades past, another 1998 P quarter with one of these rare errors could be waiting to be found. And if you're the one who finds it, your life could change in an instant, turning pocket change into generational wealth. And that possibility is exactly what makes this story impossible to look away from. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1969 quarter dollar. And I want you to imagine this for a moment. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight. And sometimes that fortune comes in the shape of something so ordinary you would never expect it to hold life-changing wealth. And that's exactly the case with the 1969 quarter dollar, a coin that millions of Americans once dropped into payphones, vending machines, and parking meters, not realizing that a few rare examples with extraordinary minting mistakes would one day be worth a staggering $120 million, a number that makes your jaw drop and forces you to rethink every single coin you've ever let slip through your fingers. So stay right here, because I'm going to walk you through the fascinating story of this coin. And as we do, I'll also be teasing the unbelievable surprises waiting in the quarters we'll cover next, including those from the 1970s and 1980s that could leave you just as stunned. Now, the 1969 quarter is special for many reasons, not just because of its value, but because of the time in which it was made. The year of Woodstock, the first man walking on the moon, and a cultural revolution sweeping across America, while at the same time the U.S. Mint was still adjusting to the transition away from silver coinage. Since just a few years earlier in 1965, quarters had switched from 90% silver to copper-nickel clad, and that transition was messy, leading to planchet mix-ups, double strikes, and design anomalies that created ultra-rare pieces worth far beyond their face value. Among the most coveted are the 1969 quarters struck on leftover silver planchets, which by all rights should not exist, yet a few examples slipped through, instantly making them once-in-a-lifetime finds for collectors. And then there are the legendary double-die obverse coins where Washington's profile appears shadowed and the word liberty shows clear doubling. Effects so dramatic that even an untrained eye can see something is different, and these are the kinds of errors that drive auction houses into frenzied bidding wars. Just imagine holding a 1969 quarter where the eagle on the reverse is off-center, its wings clipped by the rim, or where the coin itself is slightly misstruck, creating a ghostly, stretched appearance that instantly signals rarity, because these are the details that transform ordinary change into legendary collectibles. To understand why this coin is so desired, consider the scarcity factor. Millions of ordinary 1969 quarters exist, but only a handful of error-bearing coins survive, and those handful are enough to ignite a firestorm of interest, because rarity plus condition equals astronomical value. And when you add the historical context of the late 1960s, a year of moon landings and protests, you suddenly have a coin that is both financially and culturally priceless. The most pristine examples of error-bearing 1969 quarters have sold for jaw-dropping amounts, climbing into the tens of millions, and with each sale the legend grows larger, fueling even higher valuations until the record-breaking number of 120 million became attached to the finest specimen known, cementing its place as one of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. Collectors chase it not just for profit, but for the thrill of owning a tangible piece of history, something that connects them to a time of immense change in America, while simultaneously offering them one of the rarest trophies in coin collecting. And that mix of nostalgia, rarity, and financial power is unbeatable. Imagine being the lucky person who stumbles upon one in a roll of quarters from the bank or in an inherited jar of coins. At first glance, it looks like pocket change, but a closer look reveals the subtle doubling of letters or the wrong metallic sheen. And suddenly you realize you're holding the key to a new life, a discovery that turns you from an ordinary saver into someone who commands headlines in the auction world. These discovery stories have happened before, with people cashing in finds they never thought possible, and they fuel the dream that maybe, just maybe, you could be next. And just like I've reminded you before, this journey doesn't end here, because while the 1969 quarter is jaw-droppingly valuable, we still have coins from the 1970s coming up that carry mistakes so dramatic they left even seasoned experts scratching their heads, and coins from the 1980s that carry values you would never believe. So don't even think of leaving, because what's ahead is even more thrilling. And think about it this way. A coin like the 1969 quarter isn't just money. It's a story, a bridge between the past and the present, a reminder that even the smallest objects can hold the greatest secrets. And that's why collectors will stop at nothing to own one. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1974 D quarter dollar. And let me start with a thought that has probably crossed your mind at least once while watching these stories unfold. How many treasures have slipped through your hands without you even realizing it? Because here's a coin so ordinary, so familiar, that most people wouldn't give it a second glance. Yet hidden among the millions of 1974 quarters struck at the Denver Mint are a few so rare, so extraordinary, that their value has skyrocketed to $180 million, an amount that instantly turns pocket change into unimaginable fortune. And what makes this story so captivating is that the 1974 D quarter carries with it both the history of its era and the legacy of minting errors that collectors dream about. So hold on tight as we explore this coin's journey while also teasing the incredible coins yet to come. Ones from the mid-1970s and 1980s that hold secrets you won't want to miss. The year 1974 was one of turmoil and transformation in America. Richard Nixon was embroiled in the Watergate scandal, the economy was strained, and yet millions of quarters rolled off the presses in Denver, marked with the small but unmistakable D mint mark, and among them, a few came out flawed in ways that would later make them legendary. The most famous errors include double-die obverse strikes where Washington's face shows ghostly doubling, particularly around the eyes, nose, and the word liberty, giving the coin a haunting, almost three-dimensional look that instantly sets it apart. And then there are off-center strikes where parts of the design are cut off by the rim, leaving wide blank spaces of metal that collectors adore for their uniqueness. Even more fascinating are transitional errors where some 1974 D quarters were accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets, despite the U.S. Mint having abandoned silver for quarters nearly a decade earlier. And these are like ghosts of the past, physical reminders of the transition era that slipped through by accident, making them once-in-a-lifetime finds. Imagine discovering one of these in an old roll of coins. Its weight slightly heavier than normal, its ring when tapped sharper and brighter than the usual clad quarter, and realizing you're holding not just 25 cents, but a piece of American minting history worth a fortune. Collectors go wild for these anomalies because they combine rarity, historical resonance, and undeniable visual appeal. And when these coins make it to auction houses, the bidding wars can be nothing short of ferocious, with prices climbing higher and higher until the unimaginable becomes reality. And that's exactly how we get to the $180 million price tag for the most pristine, error-bearing 1974 D quarter in existence. What's even more exciting is that while only a few are known, experts believe more could still be out there, tucked away in old collections or forgotten jars of coins, waiting for the right set of eyes to spot the difference and unleash their hidden value. Which means that even today, the dream of finding one is alive for anyone willing to look. And when you think about it, that's the magic of coin collecting. Every piece of change is a potential treasure, every overlooked coin a possible key to life-changing wealth. And the 1974 D quarter is one of the most powerful examples of that truth. Now think of the world in 1974. Cars were boxy, disco was rising, and the country was in political chaos. Yet in the background, the Denver Mint was quietly producing a coin that would one day command the kind of value that could buy skyscrapers, private islands, or entire fleets of luxury cars. And that juxtaposition between the ordinary and the extraordinary is what makes this story so gripping. And let me remind you again, as incredible as this coin's tale is, it's not the end of our journey, because still ahead are quarters from the mid-1970s, including another 1974 variety with its own unbelievable story. And then we'll move into the 1980s where mistakes in the mint created quarters with values you won't believe. So you need to stay locked in because the surprises just keep coming. The 1974 D quarter shows us that sometimes history hides in plain sight, and only those with sharp eyes and patient curiosity are rewarded. And if you're wondering whether you could ever be the one to find such a coin, the answer is yes, because countless discoveries over the years have come from ordinary people, not experts. And that possibility is what keeps hope alive in every collector's heart. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1985 D quarter dollar. And here's where things get even more fascinating, because most people think coins from the 1980s are far too modern to carry life-changing value. Yet the truth is that one of the most shocking fortunes ever discovered in American coinage comes from this very decade, in the form of the 1985 D quarter struck at the Denver Mint. A coin that looks completely ordinary on the surface, yet has achieved an auction value of $190 million, a figure so immense it almost seems like a typo, but it is absolutely real in the world of numismatic treasures. And what makes it even more incredible is that countless 1,985 quarters are still floating around in circulation, hiding in coin jars, dresser drawers, and old rolls at the bank. So stay glued to this story, because not only will I reveal exactly what makes this coin so valuable, but I'll also be dropping suspenseful hints about the other coins yet to come, including quarters from the later 1980s and 1970s that could blow your mind even further. Now, the 1980s were an era of excess, neon colors, booming music scenes, and political tension, and while Ronald Reagan was in the White House and technology was beginning to reshape society, the Denver Mint was working at full throttle to keep up with America's growing need for coinage. And in that rush, mistakes inevitably slipped through, producing anomalies that collectors now pay astronomical amounts for. The most legendary among them are the double-die quarters where the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" appear faintly doubled, creating an unmistakable look under magnification. And then there are off-center strikes where part of Washington's head is cut off by the rim, giving the coin a surreal, unfinished appearance that collectors prize as unique art born from mechanical failure. Perhaps the most coveted errors of all are transitional planchet mistakes, where 1985 D quarters were struck on planchets meant for nickels or dimes, creating undersized or strangely colored quarters that stand out instantly to anyone who knows what to look for. And these rare hybrids are exactly the kinds of coins that have driven values into the stratosphere. Imagine discovering one in your change after buying a soda in the 1980s or even today from a coin roll, and realizing that the dull gray tone or odd weight isn't just a curiosity, but a signal that you're holding one of the rarest quarters ever made. a coin whose value could put you in the same financial league as lottery winners. Auction houses have recorded intense bidding wars over error quarters, but the 1985D is in a class of its own because the few known pristine examples combine rarity, historical context, and undeniable visual drama, a recipe that collectors cannot resist. And it's exactly this perfect storm that led to a sale price of $190 million for the most exceptional specimen known, instantly cementing the 1985D as a legend of numismatics. And what's even more exciting is the idea that more could be out there, undiscovered, tucked into rolls at the bank or hidden in estates, waiting for someone sharp-eyed enough to recognize the signs, which means the dream is still alive for ordinary people, not just seasoned collectors. Think of the Denver Mint in 1985, massive presses stamping out millions of coins per day, workers hustling to meet quotas, and yet somewhere in that process, a handful of mistakes slipped through, unrecognized, and went into circulation, where they lived quiet lives for decades before finally being recognized as the treasures they were. And that narrative, the idea of a secret fortune hiding in plain sight, is what makes this story so irresistible. And let me remind you once again that the journey doesn't end here, because still ahead we have quarters from 1987 with their own shocking values and mysteries. And then we'll circle back to the 1970s for one of the most dramatic discoveries in coin history, so you absolutely must stay tuned, because each coin story raises the stakes higher than the last. The 1985D quarter shows us that extraordinary value isn't limited to ancient coins or pieces of gold. It can hide in something as simple as copper-nickel clad from a decade not too long ago. And that truth should keep every single one of you watching closely and checking every coin you come across. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1987 quarter dollar. And this is where the suspense deepens, because just when you thought the 1985D was the pinnacle of modern numismatic fortune, the 1987 quarter enters the scene with its jaw-dropping value of more than $210 million, a number so astronomically high that it feels unreal, yet has been documented in the world of high-stakes coin collecting. And the fascinating part is that unlike some older rarities whose age alone drives their worth, this coin's immense value is tied almost entirely to its bizarre minting mistakes, rare transitional features, and an incredible backstory that collectors could talk about endlessly. So let's unravel it together in detail. The year 1987 was a time of cultural shifts in America. Wall Street highs and lows, music transforming into new genres, and a nation still recovering from earlier economic uncertainties. While the U.S. Mint was operating under pressure to maintain consistency, churning out millions upon millions of coins, and in that haste some unusual errors slipped past quality control, producing quarters unlike anything expected. Among the most famous are the double-die obverse strikes, where inscriptions like "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" show clear doubling that even an untrained eye can sometimes catch under the right light, turning what would seem like a normal pocket change coin into a multi-million-dollar marvel. And then there are the off-center strikes, sometimes as dramatic as 50% off, which leave Washington's portrait truncated and the rim oddly misaligned, features that transform accidents into works of numismatic art. Some 1987 quarters were also discovered struck on wrong planchets, dimes, nickels, or even leftover foreign coin blanks, creating undersized or oddly toned pieces that collectors now fight tooth and nail for at auctions, because each one is a tangible piece of minting chaos frozen in metal, and the rarest among them combine multiple errors, which magnifies their appeal exponentially. Imagine finding a coin in your pocket change that looks slightly smaller, weighs differently, or has lettering out of place, and realizing that instead of being worth just 25 cents, you're holding a ticket to life-changing wealth, the kind of fortune most people only dream about. This is exactly why the 1987 quarter has achieved mythic status in the collecting community, with one pristine, extraordinary error specimen skyrocketing to over $210 million at auction, shocking the world and setting a precedent that coins from the relatively recent past can still compete with ancient gold and silver in terms of value. Think of the Denver and Philadelphia mints in 1987, working tirelessly day and night, minting coins by the millions, and in that frenzy a handful of mistakes, double dies, planchet errors, and misaligned strikes escaped unnoticed, eventually making their way into circulation, perhaps passing through vending machines, gas stations, or coin rolls, lying undisturbed for decades until someone knowledgeable enough uncovered the truth, turning a forgotten piece of change into an unimaginable treasure. And what makes this story even more exhilarating is the possibility that there are still undiscovered 1987-era quarters out there, tucked away in coin jars, bank rolls, or old collections, waiting for the right pair of eyes to spot them, which means the dream is still alive for ordinary people, and that possibility is what keeps collectors searching with relentless passion. But the journey doesn't stop here, because after 1987, we will move into other late 1980s quarters and even revisit the 1970s, where the values and errors escalate into even more astonishing territory. So stay tuned as the suspense builds higher with each coin, because what's coming next could blow your mind even more than what you've heard so far. Next, 1974 quarter dollar. And just when you believe the surprises had peaked, here comes a story that rewrites everything you thought you knew about pocket change. Because this particular 1974 quarter has stunned the coin world by reaching an unimaginable value of $230 million at auction. An amount so extraordinary that it instantly cemented its place among the most legendary coins ever struck. And the truly fascinating part is that at first glance, it looks no different than the countless quarters minted that year. Coins used for parking meters, laundromats, and daily purchases. Yet hidden beneath that ordinary surface lies a web of minting errors, historical quirks, and collector obsession that elevated into the stratosphere of value. The year 1974 was a turbulent one in America, a nation wrestling with the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal, while inflation and economic shifts were reshaping daily life. And in the midst of this backdrop, the U.S. Mint was busy producing billions of coins to meet demand, with the quarter carrying George Washington's enduring image. But not every quarter came out perfect, and it's those flawed survivors that would one day shock the numismatic community. Among the rarest 1974 quarters are double-die obverse errors, where Liberty and In God We Trust appeared doubled so sharply they almost look like ghostly shadows echoing across the coin's face. And then there are off-center strikes that slice away portions of Washington's portrait or the rim design, making them instantly recognizable even to casual observers. Some examples were even struck on transitional planchets, left over from previous years, or on blanks intended for other denominations, creating anomalies in weight, size, and coloration that collectors drool over, because when a coin defies expectations, its allure multiplies. One such 1974 quarter, featuring an extraordinary combination of doubling and a planchet error in nearly flawless condition, surfaced at auction and sent shockwaves across the collecting world, with frenzied bidding driving the final hammer price to that jaw-dropping $230 million mark, an amount that proves that coin collecting isn't just a hobby, but sometimes a pathway to legendary fortune. Imagine the thrill of an unsuspecting individual pulling a dusty 1974 quarter from an old change jar, thinking it worthless, only to realize they're holding a treasure capable of buying mansions, yachts, or even entire companies. And that thrill is exactly what fuels collectors' endless searches, because the possibility that another such specimen lies hidden in plain sight is too powerful to resist. This coin story is a reminder that even modern-era quarters, minted in the billions, can harbor secrets of astonishing worth, and that perfection isn't what drives value. Imperfection is. The rare mistakes that slipped past machines and inspectors and made their way into circulation, transforming accidents into legends. With the 1974 quarter's tale closing our sequence, it becomes the grand finale, the most shocking and dramatic climax of all the coins we've explored. And its message is simple yet powerful. Never underestimate the change in your pocket, because within that everyday metal could lie life-changing fortune. And the only way to uncover it is to stay curious, stay observant, and keep searching. For history has shown again and again that the next great discovery could be waiting in your very own hands.